Ublumi, good afternoon. Welcome to the Tunnganarniq show. I'm your host today. My name is Margaret Naxana. We are broadcasting live out of the Inuvialuit Communication Society here in Nunavik. On today's episode, we are doing another Zoom call, and we're really lucky to be able to have Mr. Tom Mcleod from Mcleod on today's show. Hey, Tom, can you hear me?
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Hello, I'm happy to be here. I'm in Ottawa, Ontario, and I'm seated Algonquin territory.
Nice. So you're in Ottawa, Ontario. What's the weather like over there today?
Really hot. As sort of like when Nunavik comes south, the main thing we do is complain about it being too hot, and I am no exception to that.
I agree 100% with that, because I don't even like it hot when it's hot up here in the north. So Tom, you're originally from Mcleod.
Most definitely, yes. From Mcleod. I spent like most of my youth growing up in Mcleod, going up in the boat down towards McPherson or Sigachik, or up to Shingle Point in the Yukon, up on the north coast there.
Yeah. So you grew up here in the north, and then you moved down south just recently?
Yeah, I think it was in March that I came down to Ottawa. I'm sort of one of those back and forth types that I was up in the north like most of my life, but I came down for school. I went to Toronto for 4 years at Ontario College of Art and Design University. So it's like back and forth.
Okay. So the way I usually like to start the show, we've talked a little bit about it, but I like to run the show in the chronological order of your life. So this is the first time I get to meet you, like I've said before. And I've read a little bit about your, is it your profile? I don't know what it would be called, but in it anyways, it talked about how you've always been interested in storytelling and media. So that seems to be like the art form that you've chosen to do with your life.
Yeah, like I have all these different like jobs and titles and things that I do, and like throughout all of those, like I sort of take the like title that goes with whatever I'm doing, but the one that I keep consistently is storyteller, because that's what I do. Like everything I do is a different variation of storytelling, and it's something I've been doing since I was like a small child. I used to go to like I used to go to powwows and like Yellowknife and stuff and tell stories, like traditional stories. And when I was really young, I was maybe 8 or 9, I used to tell stories on CBC North. And that's sort of been my thing, is I tell stories.
So I wanted to bring up the first thing, and I call it the first thing just because you were 11 when you wrote a book. Can we talk a little bit about that? Yeah.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, there was this project going on where there was this grant that there were these people who wanted to make a book for every official language in the NWT. And for I think it was the Gwich'in one, that they contacted my dad actually to be like, hey, do you want to write this book? And some people came by, a photographer and the editor, and me being like the really chatty young person that I was, talked their ears off and was like, hey, look, I do this, I write. And what ended up happening was Mcleod was actually flooding at the time. This was 2006. The town was flooding and people were being evacuated to Inuvik from Mcleod. And me and my family, we still wanted to go muskrat hunting. The water was high, which means we didn't have to pull the boat over the shore to get into all the lakes. So it was pretty great. It was actually a lot easier to hunt muskrats that year.
Yeah.
So we brought the photographer and the editor out hunting muskrats with us. We shot some ducks and cooked them over the fire. We cooked them up some muskrat tails to eat. And after it was sort of all over, we sat down in like the in my house, and just like with a laptop. I didn't have a laptop before that point. That was pretty amazing. And just started typing away and got through the book in about a week or two. It was quite the thing.
So you were 11 years old. Did anyone help you write the book?
So Mindy Willett is the co-author and editor of the book, and she's amazing. I think she's still an educator down in Yellowknife. Really nice lady, amazing. And she sort of helped me through. My spelling as an 11-year-old was fine, but not like sort of book quality. So I got a fair bit of help there. Yeah, it was really wonderful. Working with her was great, and I feel like it really helped me like refine some of my a lot of my writing points. Like I'm an editor now, so my writing's supposed to be okay. I've done a good job with it since. So I'm really thankful for Mindy for like helping me up there. Yeah, so she helped, and Tessa McIntosh was the photographer and took wonderful, amazing photos that really sort of brought the book together.
Yeah. I have the book here. It's called The Delta is My Home. So when one of the people who work here, his name is Jason, he was like, Tom's written a book. And I was like, what? He's written a book? Like, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to get this book. And he said that you can get it at the library. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to go and find my library card and go and get this book. And then it ended up being here at the Innu Valley Cultural Resource Center. And he brought it, and I was like, oh, he was just a kid when he wrote the book. I thought I was grabbing a novel to read. That's what I assumed. And then he's like, no, he wrote it when he was 11 years old. And I was like, what? That's insane that an 11-year-old from Mcleod wrote a book. That's really impressive that you've done that. So would you say that helped you get into doing what you're like, sparked an interest?
I think that I was already doing storytelling things by the time I wrote the book. I'd already been on CBC radio for like a year at that point, maybe 2 years. It had been a minute. And I'd already been doing storytelling things. I feel like it was really nice, sort of, it was a really nice source of like validation when we were actually, when we were trying to get the book published. We actually had a hard time finding a publisher because a lot of book publishers in the South thought that, oh, this is like a Native book. Nobody wants to read Native books. Natives might buy it, but no one else will buy it. So nobody wanted to publish it, right? And what happened actually was that the book ended up being a bestseller in Canada. It went really well. It got up for a lot of awards. Like a lot of libraries end up like having to carry it because it was like a Silver Birch Express nominated book, as well as a few others. And it sold really well. And now the company that was like, maybe Native books don't sell so well, has an entire Native publishing division.
Yeah. So that's really good though, that it was able to be successful and a bestseller in Canada. That's very impressive. I was probably too young to know that when I was a kid, when it originally came out. Yeah. So you did the book, and then what did you do after that? Like, how did you get into like kind of media that you do now? A little bit more serious, like in a career wise.
So after the book, I sort of like took a step back from artsy things for a bit. Like, you know, I still like out in the coast, like carve little boats out of wood and stuff like that. But after that, it wasn't so much career breaking moments at 11 or 13 years old. But what had happened after that was I, finished schooling and all that sort of thing. And I went to college in Whitehorse, and I was doing bachelor's degree in biological sciences, I thought I wanted to be one of those climate change scientists. But that was back in the Harper years when they were hiding all the like climate change science, and I figured that this is a doomed career, and started doing like youth work and stuff like that. And I actually saw a advertisement for an internship at ICS.
Mm-hmm.
And I started an internship there in 2013. It was a minute ago. It's a little bit odd to me that the things in my life happened like 10 years ago now. It's a bit hard for me to figure out. So I went there, and I actually I'd been telling stories, I've been writing, I've been doing all these things, like on the side, nothing like really big and momentous, but I've been working on those things. And when I got to ICS, they were sort of like going through a bit of a change and like making things differently. And what they were working on, what they wanted to work on was a children's show. And I wrote the script for their children's show for the animated bit, and I ended up doing like the animation for a show, which was
really exciting.
really exciting, but also it was stop motion animation. And I think we did 72 minutes of stop motion animation in 6 months, which I don't know if we've ever done animation before, but is a lot of animation in a very short time frame. So I ended up working 6 days a week, like 12 hours a day, like doing click, move, like these little dolls that we like digitized, put through a filter, and it looked kind of like hand drawn. And it was really fun, really rewarding, but it was a lot of work. And I also ended up directing we had some child actors do the voices for the characters, and I directed the kids in their doing their lines, which was a joy. It was actually really wonderful. They were amazing to work with. Really nice, good kids, hard workers. Like, it's one thing, like working with kids, like you can only work for so many hours and things like that. So like we expected it to take a certain amount of time. We actually did a lot quicker because they're just like really wonderful what they're doing. One of the more fun things was coaching them through how to pronounce words in Iviluktin. Because it was like a language learning show, right? Sort of like a Inivielita Dora, I guess, is sort of the way that I explain it.
Yeah.
And there were some words that are like a bit more difficult to say, like coming from like an English background where kids speak English, speaking Inuvialuktun can be really hard, especially words that like have that sort of like stop in them.
Use the back of your throat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I remember we were doing an episode about the seasons, and Tunnganarniq is the word for spring. And the way it's spelled and the way that one of the kids pronounced it was up and rack.
Yeah.
Which turned into the entire rest of the day laughing. Yeah. So and eventually like the show came together and it turned out really wonderful, and like I really enjoy it when like people want to see my like television stuff, like that's what I show them. It was a really rewarding time, and I'm really happy about the work we did at ICS. Like I think the like regional Inuit like communication societies are really important for like preserving culture, language, and sort of like, and also like culture isn't stagnant, right? Being sort of like cultural producers going forward is also like extremely important. And being part of that work was super rewarding.
I was just going to say that you were given like such a unique opportunity, because not everyone from our area gets to do stuff like this that you have been able to do and be so successful while doing it, and in a nation, it being nationwide as opposed to just our little area here in the north. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So,
sorry.
Oh no, you could keep going.
Oh, it was really wonderful, like being recognized, especially like I grew up in the Mcleod Sept region, and like going down the street, people like, "Hey, dum up da," is like is a really fun thing to have.
Yeah. Yeah. That's like the most famous show I think that we've had here in the north.
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely.
So what did you do after? So you started at ICS in 2013, and that's when you got to do your first like kind of cartoon that you were saying.
Mhm.
And then what did you do after that? Was there anything else that you really worked on that you've been really proud of afterwards, after that?
I think that a lot of what I did sort of in that time was like I did a lot of work at Psychsat, like photography, and I
Mhm.
sort of worked on a lot of like the technical aspects of like filming and like sort of non-linear storytelling, like telling stories sort of like in a way of like, this is what happened, this is what happened, this is what happened, is something that I've been doing sort of naturally throughout my life. But like telling stories in like a magazine format is like, this thing happened. And then totally different happening over here is this thing, which
Mhm.
was a really wonderful thing to sort of like learn and get my brain around, was like telling stories in different ways.
Yeah.
And we did like talk show at ICS, which was really fun. Like just hearing, we brought elders from around the ISR to tell stories, and just being able to hear everybody tell stories was really wonderful. And like talk to people and like learn new stories was really amazing.
Mhm. It's really
Um,
heartwarming.
mhm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, getting to know people and like actually spending like proper time with like elders and like learning the ways that they do things, and like that one thing that I tell people sometimes, little tangent here. Like sometimes
Mhm.
I tell
Yeah.
stories and some people are like, you shouldn't tell it that way. Like it'd be way better if you told it like this. And what I always say to that is, I learned this story from this person and they told
Yeah.
it like this, and I'm keeping this continuity of storytelling, because you
Mhm.
can hear a story told from like Siberia and Chukotka and the same story all the way to Greenland, and it's told the same way,
Yeah.
because like Inuit storytellers across the north like respect storytelling and like try to keep the stories to like the heart and soul of them like the same, right?
Mhm. It's just like a drum dancing song, kind of
Mhm.
like they've been sung this way for probably thousands and thousands of years, and we continue to do it because that's what we're taught, like as Inuvialuit people, Inuit across the globe, like we are taught to respect and keep things the original way. So that makes it's a respectable thing to learn something and then to teach it the exact same way. Yeah, it's just kind of what our people are taught. So that makes so much sense when you say it, like the way you described it and how uh, other people would like you to say something. So yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So you started. So sorry, I'm a little bit slow because I'm digesting everything that you're saying.
Mhm.
Because this is the first time I've said this. I just said this song. This is the first time I've met you, so I'm getting to learn all this stuff about you. Um, you lived in Aklavik, and then you moved here to Inuvik. You've always been doing storytelling and some type of media, and then you started at ICS. When you started at ICS, did you already have the technical backside behind all of it, or is that something that you were taught?
Oh no. So I had been more of like a writer and like an academic sort of type for a bit
Mhm.
when I went to ICS, not super technical person.
Mhm.
So I like I never really used cameras before. Like actually my dad had a YouTube channel, and like I'd film some things for him on like a Wii camcorder.
Yeah.
Like we ran into a herd of muskox up in the Richardson Mountains,
Mhm.
and he didn't want to walk close to the muskox. Why would you? They're dangerous, right? So he was like, "Hey, here, take this camera, go and walk up to those muskox over there, and don't get trampled. Make sure you hit record."
Yeah.
So I'd done things like that where like we were out in the bush and it was maybe a bit too scary for my dad to go and film something. So I gave it a shot and I like snuck up to the muskox and got to about, I don't know, maybe like 15, 20 feet away from them, like filmed a bit, things like that. But I didn't really have like a deep technical knowledge before that.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm really happy that I got to learn over at ICS.
Sorry, I can just totally picture that. And I'm trying not to laugh too much because I know the camera is flipping back and forth, each sound I make and each sound you make. But that had to have been an experience. I'm taking away a little bit from the technical side. But my fiance, I lived in Sax Harbor for a few years, and him and his dad, Larry, they were herding muskox. They were going to go hunt muskox. And me and his mom, my mother-in-law, Yvonne, we were just waiting. They took the skidoos, they left us by the sleds, and we were just waiting, and they were going to go get the muskox. And do you know how they got the muskox? They herded them to us, you know, where they wanted to process the meat. And Yvonne's laughing at me, and I'm watching the muskox run to us, and I'm like, running around a sled. Like, I'm running around that sled. I'm trying to hide because in my head, the muskox are going to run right through us. She laughed at me because as soon as they saw us, they like veered to the side, and then they harvested 2 muskox and we processed it. But the fact that your dad didn't want to do that and he sent you, that makes me laugh, because I remember being the scared person and people laughing at me because it's so exhilarating and it gets your heart pounding. Yeah.
Oh, certainly.
So sorry, it just really made me laugh there a little bit too much.
Oh no, I'm down here in Ottawa, so I am happy to hear hunting stories from folks.
It was really lots of fun to be able to do that kind of stuff. And then, sorry, once you started, you said that you were getting trained after that? Like, that was the experience you did have?
So I was getting trained on one hand, but on the other hand, I'm just, I'm like a really, like I see something and I want to like figure it out. So I spent tons of time with cameras and like researching cameras and like trying new things and just like going through and doing my best to like, I suppose, get good at these things. And like now I have my own fancy camera that I film things on. And like my own, like this is my like, little home TV studio, I suppose. It's one of those things where like I got a lot of help from the folks there, like sort of get my feet firmly planted. And afterwards just kind of like took off and like, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try this, and went at it.
Yeah. And so you were with ICS for how long? Were you working with ICS for?
I think about 3 or 4 years. It was a minute. I was there for a bit. It was really a wonderful time. And I left ICS in 2016, I believe, to go to university. Yeah.
And what did you go to university for?
So I went to the Ontario College of Art and Design University, the Maastrichts, for a degree called, what is it? Integrated Media, Bachelor's in Integrated Media.
Yeah.
Which was, sorry.
No, keep going.
Which is sort of a mix, like technical and I suppose, like philosophical degree. Like it's an art degree in one hand, like a technical art degree. And on the other hand, it's like this is art history and theory.
Yeah. So I'm sure that being from the north, that you were able to bring that side down with you when you went down, because it seems like, personally, in my own opinion, it's like an unlimited amount of resources, storytelling, all this in one, and you can express that in many different forms when you're going to school.
Oh, certainly. It's sort of it's really nice in the sense that you can do things and they like sort of don't matter. Like you can make a film in school and like you can get a bunch of people to work on it and you can only show it to like 12 people, right?
Yeah.
Like I was in school and like I made some really fun things at ICS that were like I poured my like heart and soul into because everyone was going to see it and needed to be good. But I
Yeah.
made some things at school which were like technically terrible, but like the idea behind them was really fun and like I really loved that little joke that the whole thing was based around.
Yeah.
So I made these like little joke films that I thought were really funny and I enjoyed making. And I
Mhm.
think those helped me like develop my practice
Yeah.
to be better and more like well-rounded. But at the same time, I don't know if I'd really want everyone to see it because it was just like I joke, right?
Yeah. So you got to put a little bit more passion into it
Mhm.
and just make it more fun, which is always good. It's always a good balance to have both, like to be able to do that type of expression in your art form.
Oh, certainly.
Yes. So, and then what did you do after you completed university?
So during like the end bit of my like university time of university, I went to a lot of like art shows and sort of like did a bunch of like art. So I made a short film with another individual, Darcy Bernhardt, who
Mm-hmm.
was the animator. I told a story and she animated it, and it was amazing. It was like I really love Darcy's animation. It's amazing. It's really wonderful.
Yeah.
And we showed it at a all night like art event in Montreal. And after that, it got picked up by the Imaginative Film Festival down in Toronto. And it also got picked up by Maoriland Film Festival in New Zealand and Biriranga Film Festival in Australia, as well as a few others. So,
So it really took you around the world.
so there was a pandemic.
Oh, right.
So
Say.
it
Yeah.
took me around the world on Zoom.
On Zoom, got you recognition around the world.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yeah,
that must have been really exciting.
it was really fun. I'd actually been on the selection committee for Imaginative before. Um, I was one of the people like selecting films for the film festival. It's run in like the TIFF Lightbox, like the Toronto National Film Festival venue in Toronto, which is like a really fun place to be. And like being there and like getting to see all of the native films from across the world was just really amazing. Like it's such a privilege to be able to see how stories are told from different indigenous cultures across the world. It's just really amazing. And I saw some of the best films I've ever seen, like while on that selection committee.
Yeah.
And then a few years later to have like my own film be in there, like to be like worthy of the same thing that all of those people's like wonderful films were. But it was really, it felt great.
I'm sure that the way you feel about everyone else's films, the people on the opposite end who got to see, I'm sure they felt the exact same way about your film. Yeah. And then so the pandemic's been on for a year and a half. That was a year and a half ago.
Mhm.
So what have you been doing since then?
So
the
since then,
world-
I've been doing a lot of writing. Like,
Mhm.
can't really go out and film with a bunch of people during a pandemic. I suppose you can. People are doing it now. But I've been a bit wary of it.
Mhm.
I really don't want to be the person to pull a bunch of people out to be like, let's go and film, and it's somebody catches COVID. It just
Yeah.
feels terrible.
Mhm.
So I was sort of sitting on my hands a bit for the whole first half of the pandemic. Like I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what was safe to do. So it was a bit difficult to really put something together. So what ended up happening was I did Zoom things. I for last year's Aboriginal Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, um,
Yeah.
there was a like celebration over like Zoom where people told stories, and I went out in my boat and like I drove my boat out just far enough that you can get cell phone reception, and I set up my phone and I told stories while paddling my boat down the river, which was really fun. I kind of wish I did more of. And I told some, I lit the stove in the middle of summer. It was way too hot, but I lit the stove and like I sat down and I had like the fire going behind me. I told some stories there, like sort of like traditional like Inuit stories to primarily a like Inuit audience,
Mhm.
which I found really rewarding and also like really enlightening because some of like our Inuit stories, a lot of like Eastern Inuit had never heard before. So sort of the discussion of like what Eastern Inuit think Inuit stories like are and what they mean was
Mhm.
really interesting because I'd never like heard Eastern Inuit like talk about Inuit stories before because they never heard them honestly.
Mhm. Can I put you on the spot and hear a small story?
Oh, sure. Let's see. What is
Because
a
that's a really interesting point of view, because we are Inuit, Inuvialuit, we're one. We are so different because there's a big space between us. So that's really interesting to hear that they got to hear our stories. I'm sure I'd have the same exact reaction if I got to hear any stories from the Inuit people in the East. But I would like you to tell me a story and the rest of everyone else watching the Tunnganarniq show.
Okay, sure. Let's see what Inuit stories. Right now, I've been thinking about a Gwich'in story that's sort of bounced around my head. My dad is Gwich'in, my mom is Inuit. So a lot of times I think about stories, the first one that pops in my head is like one or the other.
Mhm.
Um, so let's tell an Inuit story. What is a fun Inuit story? Okay. This one's sort of like a Inuit, and I also know that it is a Nupiat story. So it's told in both the ISR and in sort of the North Slope of Alaska. You ever heard the story of the baby with big teeth?
The baby with big teeth? No, I haven't heard that one.
Okay. So in this story, think back to like old times where Inuit are living in like igloos in like little villages of like maybe 20, 25 people, right? Like a family or two, all like in the winter, sort of maybe the springtime, there was this woman who was unmarried and she'd been unmarried for a long time and her father was really rich. So he took really good care of her and their little family, right? And they lived in this little village right next to this river, sort of on the coast. And the woman became pregnant. And her father, being this sort of rich older man, he had lots of, he was a really great hunter and he had lots of tools, he had lots of dogs, and he could get people to help him with whatever he wanted, right? If he needed to go whaling, he could say, hey, let's go whaling. He'd have a whole crew to go. If he wanted to go hunting caribou, he could say, hey, let's go hunting caribou. And the whole village would come and help him, right? And he would always help them in return. So his daughter became pregnant and she was really sort of lazy because her dad was so important. So she wouldn't really do anything. She'd sit down, she'd say, get me this, get me that. And when her baby came, everyone was really excited, right? There's, oh yeah, this guy is really important. His daughter is having a baby. And when the baby was born, it was born with this really big head and these really big sharp teeth. So when it was born, it came out and it turned around and it bit its mother in the stomach and started eating her. And everyone saw this. They saw, oh, this baby is a monster. And they ran out and they took off out the igloo door. And they all ran away, and that baby turned around and it saw them running, and it ran after them with its little baby legs and its big baby head, and it started biting at them. And it would bite their ankles and it'd bite their calves, and they all ran out through the door and it'd crawl through a little door. And so they all started running and they all ran to the river and they started running over and they jump into the river and they'd swim across. And when I got to the river, that baby, it had a big head and had little tiny arms and legs, right? Because it's a baby. And it couldn't get across the river. We knew it would drown. So that rich man, he said, hey, I forgot my knife. He had this one knife he really liked, right? So he told everyone there, hey, all you young men, you're all so young and strong. You can outrun a baby. You could beat it up if need be. Whoever gets my knife, when you go over there and get my knife, and if you do that, I'll give you everything I own. It's all yours. It's really like my knife. So all those young men, he thought, it's just a baby. Sure, it has big teeth. They could get over there. And they all swam back across that river and they started running for that igloo. And that baby started going after them, biting their ankles and pulling them down, eating them. And this one young boy, he got through because he's the last one across the river, and he came in, he took that knife and he ran back while the baby was attacking people, but that baby saw him and it started chasing him too, and it came after him, and he just got to the river before it caught him, and he gave that rich man his knife, and the rich man said, okay, you got me my knife, thank you. Everything I own, it's all yours. You just got to go and take it. And that baby was still over there with all his stuff.
Oh.
So nobody ever went back there, and no one lived in that place ever again. All those boys went over to grab that knife and they couldn't even take what they were owed.
Oh my gosh. I've never heard that story ever, but my cheeks hurt. Oh God. Can you see? Like, my cheeks are sore now from laughing. And when you told that story, did everyone laugh? I'm sure everyone laughed.
Like some people were shocked and some people laughed. I didn't tell that story. I told a different story, but that is like that's like a Western Arctic story as far as I know.
Oh my goodness, Tom, my face hurts from laughing. I tried to keep my laughs quiet because, again, the camera's going to flip back and forth and my face hurts from laughing. I was like, oh my gosh, that was so funny. Thank you. You're really good, Tom. You're really good at this. You are.
I really enjoyed the stories. It's
Yeah, no, that was a really good story. I wasn't expecting that at all. Like, I was expecting people to be like shocked at big teeth, but that it was completely different than what I thought it was. Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that story. Now, if I can get back on my train of thought for the show. And then, so you said you were struggling and you were doing a little bit of storytelling and telling people the stories from the West. What else did you do? How else did you were able to express yourself with your art form after that?
So during like this pandemic time, I'd done a bit more writing. I ended up writing for like an academic thing, I suppose, for the Indigenous Curatorial Collective. Back then they were the Aboriginal Curatorial Collective, but times change, everything becomes Indigenous. And I wrote a piece for them, which was really like a really good sort of thought exercise, like sort of sitting down, writing. It was a great time. A lot of the people who were also like writing for the piece like were really wonderful people, and like I learned a ton from everyone else who was sort of a part of that project. I really do enjoy doing these sort of like collaborative events or pieces because I just really enjoy learning from other people. The piece I did for the Indigenous Curatorial Collective was sort of a more of a think piece, but a lot of people did similar things, and like they came from all over the world. Like some of them were from America, some of them were from like South America, and some people from Canada. So it's like a really good, some of them were from New Zealand, good north-south sort of contingent of folks. And sort of like hearing from them and the way that they tell stories and how like their cultures change, like what their cultures fixated on was really interesting because with like Iniviali, we're sort of like we like to be funny. Like the story that I told you, we're often sometimes like our stories are a bit horrific.
Yeah.
Is like sort of a through line through a lot of our storytelling.
Yeah.
And there's always some sort of like, I think a way that Beverly Amos has put it is that like in Iniviali, everybody had a role and a thing to do, and like people who get like greedy or like really like self-centered or like punished in a lot of these stories. And like sort of being like selfless and like putting like the group of everyone before yourself is like a big through line. But like some of the through lines in like a lot of these other people's work was just really interesting. Like one of them, their culture was South American, and one thing that their entire culture fixated on was like Elf, like the TV character from the 80s.
Yeah.
Became like one of their like cultural mascots, which was really interesting. And just seeing like how different like indigenous cultures like mixed with like Western culture and like went forward. It was really interesting. I really enjoyed that. And then I came down here to Ottawa and I started working with Inuit Kantani as the editor for Nuktitut magazine.
Yes, so that's what I was going to lead into a little bit. You are the editor of the magazine.
Yes.
Is it the what is the magazine called?
So it's a Nuktitut magazine.
Do you have one that you could show us?
I do. So this is the issue that I've made, covered by Megan Kayak Monteith, really amazing illustrator and painter. I'd worked with her previously on a art event called Louis Blanche in Montreal. Brought my magazine because, of course. Yeah, and oh, sorry.
I was just saying that's okay. You dropped it. That's fine.
Yeah, and it is 100% Inuit written. Like the content is all written by Inuit, which is sort of what I really want to do with like my time as editor. Like that's something that I really think is important. Like Inuit having our own voice and being able to like dictate our own stories. Because that is something that we've done successfully for like, I don't know, centuries, millennium. Like Inuit have told the same stories the same ways for thousands of years across thousands of miles.
Yes.
And the only way that like Inuit are going to get like proper sovereignty and like be able to share our ideas properly with each other is if we have our own voice.
Yes.
And that's really important to me.
So can you tell me what an editor, like what being an editor looks like for you?
So being an editor is sort of, it's sort of like finding talented people and giving them the sort of space and time and like creative direction that they need to tell their stories, right? So it's sort of finding folks who fit a theme or an idea and having them sort of put that down into like a real life physical thing, like writing words, like taking photographs, and helping them bring that forward into a form that can be like shared widely. Because a lot of people can like really write and they can put down a lot of words. And having that sort of be digestible is sort of what an editor does, is take the sort of raw work that someone puts out and making it sort of like and filtering it. It's I'm a human Brita filter for words, basically.
Yeah. So we have about 10 more minutes left in the show. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about in terms of your editor, like what you're doing with your magazine? Is there anything exciting that you're like allowed to say that you're working on or what you hope to see?
So this issue should be in community mailboxes like soon. Basically, if you watch for it in your local post office, like they should show up. One of these days, I'll look out for that. That should be an exciting time for everyone to get to read it. And also, like the direction that I hope to take like the magazine is more of a like family-centered, like community-centered direction. Like I like telling like individual stories, like the stories of people, and less like the story of like institutional storytelling that has been sort of in place like throughout a lot of like modern English storytelling. Like people like to talk about organizations and groups, where I think just getting it down to like the single Inuk and like their like personal stories, I think is really important. And that's sort of what I'm trying to do with my current artistic expression.
Yes, yes. No, I absolutely love that. And I completely admire it that you've been able to take something so small and in terms of your life, make it so big and successful. Yes. We have a few more minutes left. Do you mind sharing one more story? Because when I look back at how this video is going to run, that is a highlight for sure. I absolutely loved it. And it just brought like the episode so much more funny. Like it just, that's the type of stuff that I love to see on this show. Do you mind to end before we end the show, just sharing one more story? It's up to you. You don't need to if you, yeah.
You know, I think that'd be a nice thing to do. Maybe a Puchin story this time.
Yep, that's completely fine.
It's tell one, let's tell another. Also, this is a story that's been on my mind recently. This is sort of how I tell stories a lot of the time. Is like I think about a story a lot, and it goes through like in my daily life. I think about how this story like works with like modern times. Like the story that I told for the film that sort of went traveling through film festivals. Really talked about like greed and climate change and people being willing to sell like their own future and like the future of their children like on the planet for like short-term gains, like how capitalism works, right? So this story has been running through my mind, and it's sort of a story about slowing down. And this is a story about a pair of older Wiccan folks and a young girl. Think back to olden times where Wiccan folk were like walking and like following the caribou, and that was sort of the main way that Wiccan folks lived back in the day. Was they would fish in the summer and they would follow the caribou and hunt them in the winter. And this one particular winter was a bit hard, and caribou didn't come back to the Western Arctic from sort of where they do their fawning. So there were hardly any caribou, and this family of about maybe 10, 15 people were walking in the mountains, and they decided that they needed to go faster. They needed to find caribou because they were starting to starve. And there was this old man, this old woman who were sort of the grandparents of the group. And there was one of their grandchildren who just couldn't quite keep up. Like they were pulling their toboggans and they had their dogs, but they just weren't making enough ground, eh? And this one of the younger men said, "Hey, we're going too slow. We gotta find caribou. This isn't going so good. We gotta really go. We gotta leave you here for a bit. Do you think you'd be okay on your own, you and Grandpa?" He told to his mother. "And you think you could keep my little daughter?" And they said, "Oh yeah, we're good chin. We could live out here by ourselves. That's not too bad." And those young people said, "Okay, we're gonna get everything ready, and we're gonna leave you some dry meat, and we're gonna leave you the stuff to make your own tent here." And they said, "Okay, you could leave us here, we'll be okay." And they weren't sure. Like, you're never sure when you're out in the bush by yourself. So those young folks, they left and they went walking, looking for caribou. And they knew where caribou should be that time of year, eh? So they thought they'd have a good chance. And those two old folks and that little girl, they went into a valley down in the mountains and they set up their camp and they got it all good and set up. And the old lady went and started sewing in the tent. And that old man was out chopping wood and looking around to see what was available in that little that valley, eh? And that little girl ran around and started playing, and they kept at that for a few weeks. And one day, that little girl came back and said, "Grandma, I'm hungry. I want to eat ungo." And that's the forearm part of the moose or caribou, eh?
Yeah.
It's that bone bit. You'd usually throw that in the fire, let it burn. That old man was he was burning some bushes because he was trying to get them out of the way. And that little girl said, "Oh, I want to eat ungo." And that old lady said, "There's nothing. You could have dry meat. That's all we have. That's all you could eat." And that little girl said, "No, I don't want that. I'm tired of eating dry meat. I want to eat ungo." And that old lady said, Hey, old man, come here. This little girl is too hungry. She's hallucinating. She's going crazy. Come and check her." And that old man came and he told that little girl, "You're okay? What you're seeing?" And that little girl said, "I'm hungry and I want to eat ungo. There's some in the fire." And that old man is burning bushes, burning, "What you're seeing? You want ungo in the fire?" He said, "Okay, then show me. Show me your ungo." And they walked and they went to that fire and they looked into it, and sure enough, in that fire, you could see they thought it was bushes. It was two big pairs of antlers. And there was two moose that got their antlers stuck together, and they got stuck in those bushes, and they thrashed around until they were so buried in the mud and in the bushes that they couldn't even see them. But that little girl, she had sharp eyes, huh? She saw them. She knew they were there, and the old man, he threw snow on it, and he put his fire out, and he dragged those two moose out. And sure enough, they had two full bull moose. Their whole family left them because they were starving, and there's two full moose right there. They set up another teepee and they warmed it up and they started smoking at moose meat. And they're real good. They're set right up, eh? They had lots to eat and everything was good. And their family came back and they only got a couple caribou and they're still having hard times. And they said, "Hey, you're still alive. Grandpa and Grandma, you're doing good." And they looked at them and they said, "Oh yeah, we're real good, Ned." They had a full tent full of moose dry meat now.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's good to slow down and just know where you are.
Yeah. That's really good. Like I really enjoyed hearing that story. Again, I wasn't expecting to hear two moose in the bushes that the girl saw. It reminds me, if I could tell one story, it won't be very long. But Greg Elias, my partner, we have been together for 14 and a half years. And I grew up in Tuck. I did go out on the land a lot, but not a lot of hunting with my dad, Bruce Saxana. So when I ended up with Greg, he's a hunter. That's what he loves to do. We were in Sax Harbor and we went far up the island, like Banks Island. We're down at the bottom. We went halfway up the island to sea otter. And we were out there and we were gonna go caribou hunting. Whole bunch of us. There must have been like 23 people on the trip. So a lot of four-wheelers, a lot of people. We were gonna go caribou hunting. We went just up the hill, took 2 minutes. Greg's uncle caught a caribou. They helped him harvest it, brought it back. Well, 4 other four-wheelers, 5 or 6 other people were like, okay, we're gonna go and get more caribou. We searched and all we brought was a can of Click, 1 can of Click, and I had a Snickers bar, and we're gonna go and get caribou. We had traveled probably 4 hours and we were getting hungry. So we're all sharing the Click, a slice or 2 each. And we're like, man, there's probably no more brains left. There's probably no more tongue left. Probably no more heart left. Like we're all getting hungry and like we're eating click, and we felt like we were just not smart to stay and eat the one caribou. So we didn't find caribou. We went back to the camp, and they had waited. They waited for us, like all the rest of the like 15 plus people waited for us to come back. So we got to share all of that food. We felt really like it was unsuccessful. But yeah, that's my little story of kind of going out camping and going caribou hunting. Yeah.
That reminds me of, that's a wonderful story. Like
Mhm.
people are so nice. And also like going, when I hear about Sax Harbor stories, I think like just climbing up that little mountain that's like right off
Yeah.
the ocean, that's a long trip already.
Yeah.
Like that's already a long trip.
Yeah.
But actually one of my favorite works that I've made is an art piece, is I actually made one digital paint. Like I painted one thing in my life, one thing.
Mhm.
And that was a little digital painting that I turned into a sticker of my aga, my grandmother,
Mhm.
myself and my sister. We were out at Shingle Point, and my parents had got a caribou, and they left us and my aga to cut it up. And
Mhm.
when everyone was gone, it was just my sister and my aga and me. She cut off little bits of it and let us eat it raw.
Mhm.
So our parents came back and our faces were just bloody all the way around, eh? So when I was in Toronto at school, there's a bunch of these anti-fur stickers, like all over, like fur is
Mhm.
murder and all this stuff. So what I did was well, what I maybe could have done, and one of the thing that I did apparently, was that I made some stickers, and these stickers fit perfectly over those fur is murder stickers in
Mhm.
Toronto. So there was this little black and white picture of me, my aga, and my sister with a caribou in the middle, and our little red faces.
Mhm. That's funny. Okay, I just got a text that we need to wrap up the show. So thank you so much, Tom, for coming on. I absolutely enjoyed this 1 hour. I was so nervous when it was starting, wondering how is it going to go, and it's probably one of my favorite shows because of the laughter that was in it. I was not expecting all of that. So thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for
And
having me.
yeah, it was a really good show. So I'm going to do my wrap up now. So thank you everyone for tuning in to the Tunnganarniq show, and we'll see you in the next episode.